Before we deepen our discussion, let us define first what is matter and energy. What is matter? Matter is everything that has mass and take up space. In other words, matter is something that has mass. Matter on Earth is in the form of solid, liquid, or gas, and solid, liquid, and gases are made of tiny particles called atoms and molecules. What is energy? Energy is the ability of some physical system to do work. In physics, energy is the quantitative property that is transferred to a body or to a physical system recognizable in the performance of work in the form of heat and light. It may exist in potential, kinetic, thermal, electric, chemical, nuclear, and other various forms of energy. There are many various forms of energy, namely chemical energy, electrical energy, radiant energy, mechanical energy, nuclear energy, thermal energy, and we are going to discuss it one by one. So let us define first what is chemical energy. Chemical energy is the energy that is stored within the connection or the bond between tiny part of a substance. Chemical energy is the energy in chemical substance that is released when they undergo chemical reaction and transform in other various substances. Some example of storage media of chemical energy include batteries, food, and gasoline. Electrical energy is the energy from the moving electrons. Electrical energy is the result of the movement of electrical charged particles, and when used loosely, electrical energy refers to the energy that has been converted from electrical potential energy. The examples are alternating current, direct current, lighting, batteries, capacitors, and electric eels. Radiant energy is the energy form associated with the movement of light, electromagnetic waves, and particles. And the examples of radiant energy is the heat emitted from a campfire, emission of heat from a hot sidewalk. Mechanical energy is the energy possessed by an object due to its movement or position. In other words, it is the ability to do work due to its motion. So the everyday examples of mechanical energy are turning a doorknob, breathing in and out, hammering a nail, riding a bicycle. So we are now in a nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is the energy released when the nuclei of atoms are split or fused, and nuclear energy produces electricity that can be used to power homes, school, business, and hospitals. So the thermal energy is the energy of or the energy moving from vibrating molecules. The examples are the warmth from the sun, hot cup of chocolate, and baking in an oven, and the heat from the heater.
Plants and animals display a wide variety of behaviors. Some animals migrate long distances while others hibernate. Some trees fold their leaves in the fall while others remain green. So these behaviors can be understood as a use of energy for one or more of the six purposes. So we have maintenance, growth, storage, reproduction, protection, and obtaining more energy. So later on, it will be discussed. Obtaining energy from the environment. So day-to-day survival by most living organisms depends on their ability to obtain energy from the environment. So this is based on the second law of thermodynamics, which stated that the ability to do useful work decreases as it is used to do work. There are two general strategies for obtaining energy from the environment. First, we have the using of inorganic form of energy such as sunlight to generate organic form of energy such as glucose. Next, we have the use of organic form of energy. So example is energy directly from other organisms. Autotrophs mean self-feeders. So these are organisms that converts inorganic forms of energy to organic forms of energy. So they use these inorganic forms of energy to power chemical reactions that store energy in the bonds of organic molecules. So many autotrophs generate organic forms of energy via photosynthesis. So example of autotrophs is those plants. So plants use photosynthesis in order for them to make their own food. So autotrophs uses inorganic forms of energy, which is the sunlight. In order for them to do the photosynthesis, they need sunlight. So they convert the energy, then after they release the oxygen, which is essential for humans and animals. If autotrophs are self-feeders, heterotrophs are other feeders. So they obtain energy containing molecule by eating other organisms. So heterotrophs are also known as consumers because they consume producers or other organisms or other consumers. So examples of these are dogs, birds, and also human beings. So heterotrophs, this is an example of using energy directly from other organisms. So since heterotrophs is known as consumers because they eat other organisms in order for them to gain energy. So as you can see in the picture, it eats the other organism in order for them to survive also. Animals evolved two strategies for managing body temperature. So let us differentiate endotherms versus ectotherms. Endotherms versus ectotherms. So endotherms are species that use energy at such high rates that they can use waste heat to raise and maintain their body, well above the ambient environment. Endotherms can raise their body temperature because their basal metabolic rate, the rate at which an organism uses energy while at rest, is about 10 times greater than the basal metabolic rate of an ectotherm. Examples of endotherms are birds, mammals, Atlantic bluefin tuna. Now we have ectotherms. So ectotherms can raise their body temperature above ambient temperature. By sitting in the sun goes down, their body is the same as the environment. So examples of these are fish, insects, amphibians, and present-day present. These animals as being cold-blooded. Ectotherms is idle at a low rate than endotherms and therefore use a smaller fraction their energy budget for maintenance respiration. So endotherms are also known as warm-blooded animals. So those that can maintain a constant body temperature independent of the environment is known as endotherms. So therefore, their body temperature tends to stay steady regardless of the environment. So if endotherms are known as warm-blooded animals, we also have cold-blooded animals which are known as the ectotherms. So these are animals that cannot regulate their own internal body temperature. So a very good example of ectotherms is a turtle. They must bask in the sun for heat and retreat for colder waters when temperature becomes too warm.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for today's lesson, we are going to tackle about how individual organisms use energy, or how these living organisms use the energy that they get from the food they eat every day. Okay, so we have here how individual organisms use energy. First, we have the growth. Second, storage. Third, reproduction. Fourth, protection. And last one is energy and natural selection. So the first one, we have growth. So growth is the process by which structural components of the body, such as bones and muscles, get bigger and stronger. Maturation, a growth process in which juveniles increase in size and change in form to the point at which they are capable of reproduction. In growth stages, it is where our body changes the size. So, for example, the growth stages of a bird, from hatching to chick, then from fledgling to until it becomes an adult bird that they could fly. So that is growth. Metamorphosis is a biological process by which an animal physically develops, including birth or hatching, involving a conspicuous and relatively abrupt change in the animal's body structure through cell growth and differentiation. In this metamorphosis, it is where our body changes. So, for example, the caterpillar from caterpillar, it's going to change into a butterfly. So that is the metamorphosis, the changing of
structure or physical appearance of an animal. Storage. Many plants and animals live in areas where the availability of energy is irregular. To ensure access to energy during periods when plants and animals cannot obtain new supplies of energy, plants and animals store energy. And there are some also animals reduce energy use by slowing their basal metabolic rate. Hibernation is a state which the metabolic rate slows by as much as 99%. The way in which plants and animals store energy is shaped by natural selection. So why do animals store energy? It is because there are some areas that the source of their food or the source of their energy is irregular. So they need to store energy for enable them to survive for the next few days. Next we have the reproduction. Allocating energy to produce more offspring is termed reproduction. Reproduction is a biological process by which an organism reproduces an offspring that is biologically similar to the organism. So reproduction enables and ensures the continuity of species generation after generation. Then we have senescence. In biology, senescence is a process by which a cell ages and permanently stops dividing but does not die. It is the process of growing old. So in reproduction, the organisms need to reproduce another offspring to continue the species so that in generation after generation, there are still species that still alive. Protection refers to keep something or someone safe. Animals use sharp teeth, horns, claws, which can be used to fend off predators. Speed, which can be used to escape from predators, and camouflage, which can be used to hide from predators. So, in this set of factor, for some, there are animals that they use their claws, teeth, and other parts of their body to protect their territory or to protect the other species from the predators that wanted to eat them. So, there are also the animals, they use speed to escape from their predators, and some also they use camouflage so that the predators cannot see them. What about plants? Plants protect themselves from herbivores by using a significant fraction of energy budget to fill their leaves, stems, and roots with chemicals that discourage animals from eating them by testing bad or slowing herbivores' growth rate. So, there are plants that they release toxins or some chemicals so that when their predators or the herbivores that eat them, they are going to taste bad, and the growing growth of herbivores is slowing. So protective chemicals are responsible for the flavors associated with mustard, garlic, and onions. So, for example, this one, the onion, garlic, they have this kind of smell that is very strong. When the herbivores or their predators approach them, they have this strong smell to protect themselves from the herbivores or from the predators. Energy and natural selection. Living organisms have developed several biochemical pathways to convert food to energy, which is termed respiration. One set pathways allow organisms to convert food to energy without oxygen, which is termed anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is the type of respiration through which cells can break down sugars to generate energy in the absence of oxygen. This is in contrast to the highly efficient process of aerobic respiration, which relies on oxygen to produce energy. Then another uses oxygen to convert food to energy, which is termed aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, it is the process of cellular respiration that takes place in the presence of oxygen gas to produce energy from food. This type of respiration is common in most of the plants and animals, birds, humans, and other mammals. In this process, water and carbon dioxide are produced as end product. So when we say anaerobic respiration, it is a process where they generate energy without the presence of oxygen, while the aerobic cellular respiration or to convert the food
to energy. It needs an oxygen to start the process.
Hello everyone, so for today, let's talk about the energy flows through ecosystems. Living things and the environments in which they live are highly organized and structured, following a hierarchy on a scale from small to large. As you can see in the picture, living things and the environment in which they live are organized into increasing levels of complexity from organisms into the entire biosphere. Organisms are individual living entities. For example, an antelope on an African savanna is an organism. All individuals of one species living within a specific area are collectively called population. For instance, a savanna may be a home to many antelopes. All of these antelopes represents the population of antelopes in this area. Community is a population inhabiting a particular area. For example, all the antelopes, the lions, the insects, and the other population of savanna form the savanna's community. Ecosystem consists of all the biotic or living things in a particular area together with the abiotic or non-living parts of the environment such as nitrogen in the soil or rainwater. Ecosystem can be small such as tide pools found near the rocky shores in many oceans or large such as the tropical forest of Amazon in Brazil. The biosphere is the collection of all ecosystems. It represents the zone of life on Earth. It includes the land, the water, and the portion of the atmosphere. Food chain is a linear sequence of organisms through which nutrients and energy pass as one organism aids another. Each organism occupies a specific trophic level, energy level in its position in the food chain or food web. An energy pyramid shows the relative amount of energy that passes from one trophic level to the next. Each trophic level has only about 10% of the energy available to the level below it. See in the picture, the food web shows the interaction between the organisms across trophic level. Arrow point from an organism that is consumed to the organism that consumes by it. All consumers and producers eventually become nourishment for decomposers, fungi, earthworms, bacteria, and other organisms in the soil. Notice how some organisms, such as an owl, can be considered as a multiple trophic levels. There are two general types of food web. First, the grazing food web has plants or other photosynthetic organisms at its base, followed by herbivores and carnivores. Detrital food web consists of a base of organisms feed on decaying organic matter, dead organisms, and decomposers, which break down dead and decaying organisms, and detritivores, which consume organic detritus.
The carbon cycle is nature's way of reusing carbon atoms which travel from the atmosphere into the organism in the earth and then back to the atmosphere over and over again. Most carbon is stored in rocks and sediments while the rest is stored in the ocean, atmosphere, and in the living organisms. The carbon cycle is nature's way of reusing carbon atoms which travel from the atmosphere into the organism in the earth and then back to the atmosphere over and over again. Most carbon is stored in rocks and sediments while the rest is stored in the ocean, atmosphere, and in the living organisms.
What is photosynthesis? So photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight, water, carbon dioxide to create oxygen and energy in the form of sugar. So through photosynthesis, certain organisms convert solar energy into chemical energy, which is then used to build carbohydrate molecules. So this process is a result in the release of oxygen into the atmosphere. So in order to eat and breathe, we humans depends almost entirely on the organisms that carry out photosynthesis. Main structures and summary of photosynthesis. So there are three things requires for photosynthesis, which are the sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water as the starting reactants. So what is reagents? Reagents are the elements or compounds that react to one another in the chemical reaction. Then products are the elements or compounds being produced during the chemical reaction. In photosynthesis, the water and carbon dioxide are the reagents, while the glucose and oxygen are the products. In plants, photosynthesis takes place primarily in the leaves, which consist of many layers of cells and have differentiated top and bottom sides. The process of photosynthesis occurs not on the surface of the leaf, but in the middle layer called the mesophyll. The gas exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen occurs through the regulated openings called stomata. Plants, animals, and fungi belong to a group of organisms called eukaryotes, which contains nucleus and other organelles in their cells. In plants, chloroplast containing cells exist in the mesophyll. Chloroplasts have a double inner and outer membrane. Within the chloroplast is a third membrane that forms stacked disc-shaped structures called thylakoids. Embedded in the thylakoid membrane are molecules of chlorophyll, so a molecule that absorbs light through which the entire process of photosynthesis begins. So chlorophyll is responsible for the green color of the plants. The thylakoid membrane encloses an internal space called the thylakoid space. Other types of pigments are also involved in photosynthesis, but chlorophyll is by far the most important. A stack of thylakoids is called a granum, and the space surrounding the granum is called the stroma.
This bird, like all living animals, has cells that carry out cellular respiration. During cellular respiration, organisms break down nutrients in order to produce energy in the form of ATP. Let's take a closer look to see how this happens. If we zoom in on one of this bird's cells, we can see the mitochondria, where the majority of the reactions involved in cellular respiration occur. Let's zoom in further on a single mitochondrium. Cellular respiration consists of 4 primary stages. These are glycolysis, the preparatory reaction, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. The first stage, glycolysis, occurs in the cytoplasm outside of the mitochondria. During glycolysis, enzymes break down glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvate. During this process, 2 ATP are produced, and NADH is released to be used in a later step of cellular respiration. Stage 2 is the preparatory reaction. During this stage, the pyruvates of glycolysis move into the mitochondria, where they are converted into acetyl-CoA. During this conversion process, more NADH is produced and carbon dioxide is released. In stage 3, the citric acid cycle, the remaining carbons from the initial glucose are oxidized, releasing carbon dioxide. NADH and FADH2 are also produced, in addition to 2 ATP molecules. Most ATP production occurs in stage 4, the electron transport chain, or ETC. In this stage, the NADH and FADH2 from the previous stages give up electrons to the chain. Energy is released and captured as the electrons move from a higher energy to a lower energy state using a series of proteins embedded in the membranes of the mitochondrion. Later, this energy will be used for the production of ATP, typically 32 to 34 per initial glucose. Oxygen is used by the ETC as a terminal electron acceptor. It then combines with hydrogen ions to produce water. If we add up all the ATP produced from just one glucose molecule, we can see that these reactions produce a total of 36 to 38 ATP.
So now we are going to talk about cellular respiration. The mitochondrion is the site of energy generation in eukaryotes organism whose cells contain organelles. In order for the chemical energy in the carbohydrates to be made available to do cellular work, the energy must be converted into usable form known as adenosine triphosphate or ATP. ATP is the energy currency of the cell, and everything you do, from walking down the street to reading this book, requires energy in the form of ATP. Organisms need a constant supply of ATP, and the potential energy stored in the food is the source of energy to meet this need. Plants do perform cellular respiration using the carbohydrates produced via photosynthesis. This occurs in tissues that are not photosynthetically active, as well as in leaves and stems. So, what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration is a set of metabolic reactions occurring inside the cells to convert biochemical energy obtained from the food into a chemical compound called adenosine triphosphate or ATP. Some single-celled organisms use anaerobic metabolism to extract energy from biological molecules. This process occurs in the absence of oxygen and is known as fermentation. So there are 4 stages of aerobic cellular respiration. First, we have the glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, the Krebs cycle, and the oxidative phosphorylation. So what is glycolysis? Glycolysis is the process in which glucose is broken down to produce energy. It produces 2 molecules of pyruvate, ATP, NADH or nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide, and water. The process takes place in the cytoplasm of a cell and does not require oxygen. It occurs in both aerobic and anaerobic organisms. The first stage of cellular respiration is called glycolysis and occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. During glycolysis, one glucose molecule with 6 carbon atoms is broken down into 2 pyruvate molecules with 3 carbon atoms each. Note that no oxygen is needed for this set of reactions, which means that glycolysis can proceed in the absence of oxygen. Pyruvate oxidation is a biochemical reaction that involves in the oxidation of pyruvate to create acetyl coenzyme A. Oxidation is defined as either the loss of electrons or the gaining of oxygen. In this case, pyruvate loses electrons in the process of creating acetyl coenzyme A. The oxidation of pyruvate, during which pyruvate 3 carbon atoms is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, 2 carbon atoms, accompanied by the production of carbon dioxide or 1 carbon atom. This process occurs on the mitochondrial inner membrane, and as a result, the acetyl coenzyme A is formed inside the mitochondria. Pyruvate is made in the cytoplasm, and this step moves the next compound in the pathway into the mitochondria. So in this process, the oxidation or the pyruvate oxidation, it takes place in the mitochondria. After the pyruvate oxidation, the next stage or the next process is the Krebs cycle. So what is Krebs cycle? The Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle is a series of enzyme catalase reactions occurring in the mitochondrial matrix, where acetyl coenzyme A is oxidized to form carbon dioxide and coenzymes are reduced, which generate ATP in the electron transfer chain. The acetyl coenzyme A enters into the Krebs cycle, a series of mitochondrial reactions that completes the breakdown of the original glucose, thereby releasing carbon dioxide. In this third stage of the process, energy is harvested in the form of high-energy electrons being used to generate NADH as well as another high-energy electron carrier, FADH2. The reactions of the Krebs cycle also produce a small amount of ATP. So in the glycolysis, the process it takes place in the cytoplasm, while in the pyruvate oxidation, it takes place in the mitochondria, while the Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondrial matrix. So after the glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, and the Krebs cycle, the last stage is the oxidative phosphorylation. Is the process by which ATP synthesis is coupled to the movement of electrons through the mitochondrial electron transport chain and the associated consumption of oxygen. In the final stage of aerobic cellular respiration, oxidative phosphorylation, a series of enzymes known as the electron transport chain, uses those high-energy electrons to produce a large amount of ATP. During this final stage is also when atmospheric oxygen is used as the final electron and hydrogen ion acceptor in a reaction which produces water. The need for oxygen in this final step means that these reactions are part of aerobic cellular respiration. So those are the 4 stages of aerobic cellular respiration. First, we have the glycolysis. It takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. Then second, we have the pyruvate oxidation, which it takes place in the mitochondrial. Then third one, we have the Krebs cycle, where it takes place in the mitochondrial matrix. And the final stage is the oxidative phosphorylation. So that's all the 4 stages of aerobic cellular respiration.